For years, I dreaded the night. I'd toss, turn, stare at the ceiling, and pray for even 2 hours of rest. I tried pills, teas, apps, even counting backwards from 1,000, but nothing worked. I felt like a ghost of myself, exhausted, anxious, and desperate. But one quiet evening, I made a small change, and that's when everything shifted. For the first time in over a decade, I slept through the entire night. No wake-ups. No panic. Just real, healing sleep. And today, I want to share exactly what helped me reclaim it, naturally, gently, and without a single pill. Part 1. The endless cycle of sleepless nights. For as long as I can remember, sleep had become a stranger. I'd go to bed hoping for rest, only to find myself staring at the ceiling, counting the cracks or the seconds ticking by. The room was silent, but my mind wouldn't quiet down. It was as though every little worry, every unspoken fear, every forgotten to-do on my list found its voice only at night. It wasn't always like this. Years ago, I used to fall asleep as soon as my head touched the pillow. 8 hours, sometimes more. No interruptions. No waking up in the middle of the night with a dry throat or aching joints. But somewhere between my late 50s and early 60s, the nights grew longer, not because of time, but because of how slowly it moved when I couldn't sleep. Sometimes I'd drift off for an hour or two, only to wake up at 2 a.m. drenched in sweat or feeling unusually alert. Other nights, I'd simply lie awake until dawn. My energy during the day was gone. My memory was foggy. My moods? Unpredictable. I was slowly becoming a shadow of myself. And no one seemed to take it seriously. It's just aging, they'd say. That's how it is after 60. But I didn't want to accept that. I didn't believe sleep was supposed to vanish just because I had crossed a certain age. And that's when I started looking for answers. Part 2. A chance encounter that changed everything. One rainy afternoon, I was waiting for my prescription at a small pharmacy near the edge of town. I noticed an elderly man, probably in his 80s, speaking cheerfully with the pharmacist. His skin glowed with health. His back was straight. But what caught my attention was something he said as he laughed. "I haven't slept this well since I was 30. Naturally, I couldn't help but ask. "What's your secret?" I asked him, almost half joking. He smiled gently and said, "It's not a secret, really. It's about resetting the body's rhythm, not just the clock in your head, but the system in your gut, your nerves, your breath." He paused, then added, "And it's also about stopping the habits that keep your body in panic mode without you knowing." That line stayed with me, panic mode without you knowing. Later that week, he shared a handwritten note with me. It wasn't a product or a pill. It was a routine, a few simple habits, and a golden nighttime drink I'd never tried before. He called it his sleep blend. It was mostly natural: turmeric, a pinch of cinnamon, warm almond milk, and a bit of magnesium citrate. He insisted it wasn't the drink alone but the way it calmed the nervous system and signaled to the body, "You're safe. You can sleep now." At first, I was skeptical. I had tried so many things already: lavender sprays, melatonin gummies, white noise machines, even mild sleeping pills. None brought lasting relief. But something about his energy, calm, grounded, truly rested, gave me hope. So I gave it a try. Part 3. Discovering the nervous system sleep link. The first night, I followed his advice to the letter. 2 hours before bed, I shut off all bright screens. No news, no scrolling through endless social media posts. Just soft lighting, a quiet book, and my first cup of the golden blend. I took it slowly, sipping, breathing deeply between each sip. Within half an hour, I felt a weight in my chest that wasn't anxiety, but peace. My muscles loosened. My jaw, which had been clenched for years without me realizing, began to soften. I slept for 5 uninterrupted hours that night. It might not sound like much, but for someone who hadn't slept through more than 2 hours in years, it was a miracle. What followed was even more surprising. I woke up without the usual fog. My legs weren't stiff. My mind felt sharper. I didn't feel that pull toward caffeine right away. It felt like my body was beginning to trust the night again. Curious, I began to read everything I could about the nervous system's relationship with sleep. What I found was astonishing. Turns out, the root of most insomnia in older adults isn't always age. It's a dysregulated parasympathetic nervous system, the system responsible for rest and relaxation. Years of stress, poor eating, late-night stimulation, and even inflammation in the gut can cause your body to stay in fight or flight mode even while you're lying down in bed. In other words, your body forgets how to rest. And no pill can fix a nervous system that's constantly on high alert. What the old man gave me wasn't just a drink, it was a signal. A routine. A reminder to my system that I was no longer running from danger, no longer solving the world's problems, no longer chasing the next thing. I was safe. I was home. I could sleep. Part 4. The subtle damage of inflammation and cortisol. Once I understood that my sleeplessness wasn't simply age-related, I began noticing patterns I had overlooked for years. I remembered how, during particularly stressful weeks, my sleep would worsen. I'd toss and turn for hours, my mind spiraling from one thought to the next, family concerns, financial stress, or even small regrets I couldn't seem to shake. I started reading more deeply and came across a striking concept: chronic low-grade inflammation is deeply connected to poor sleep. In fact, scientists now refer to this relationship as a feedback loop. The less sleep you get, the more inflamed your body becomes. And the more inflammation you carry, the harder it is for your body to enter restful sleep. I learned that every time I reached for sugary snacks in the evening or skipped vegetables during the day, I was unknowingly adding fuel to this inflammatory fire. Even worse, this inflammation wasn't just in my joints or gut, it was affecting my brain's sleep center. Then there was cortisol, the stress hormone. Normally, cortisol should be high in the morning, helping us feel alert, and low at night, letting us wind down. But for me, and many older adults I've since spoken to, cortisol had flipped. Mine was spiking in the late evening, right when I was supposed to feel calm. No wonder I couldn't sleep, my body thought it was daytime. This wasn't a psychological issue. It was chemical. Biological. And I finally understood that the key wasn't to fight sleep, but to gently retrain my body to remember the rhythms it had forgotten. Part 5. My new night routine, a gentle reset. The transformation didn't happen overnight, but it began with one quiet decision: I wouldn't treat bedtime as the end of the day, I'd treat it as a sacred transition. Here's what I changed. First, I had an early dinner, no later than 6:30 p.m. And instead of heavy, greasy foods, I leaned into anti-inflammatory meals: a small bowl of lentils, steamed vegetables drizzled with olive oil, a few slices of avocado, and chamomile tea to finish. Then, I dimmed the lights in my home, not just in the bedroom, but in the living room, kitchen, hallway. I replaced harsh blue bulbs with warm amber lighting. Within minutes, my body began producing melatonin naturally, without pills. An hour before sleep, I'd prepare my sleep blend: warm almond or oat milk, a pinch of turmeric, a dash of Ceylon cinnamon, a few drops of magnesium citrate, and half a teaspoon of raw honey. Stirred slowly, sipped even slower. As I drank it, I'd listen to soft instrumental music, no lyrics, no screens. Sometimes I'd read a chapter of an old novel or write one or two thoughts in a small notebook by my bedside. Nothing emotional or stressful, just a small reflection of gratitude, something like, I'm thankful I walked pain-free today. The shift this created in my body was profound. My pulse slowed. My mind stopped racing. My body stopped bracing for imaginary emergencies. And by the time I lay down, it felt like every part of me had agreed, yes, it's time to rest. Part 6. The first 7 days, not perfect, but powerful. The first night, as I mentioned, I slept 5 hours. The next night, I slept 6. On the third night, I woke up once at 3 a.m., but instead of spiraling into anxiety, I simply got up, took a few deep breaths near the window, and returned to bed. I fell asleep again within minutes. By the 7th night, I slept 8 full hours for the first time in years. The mornings felt different. I wasn't groggy. I didn't wake up panicked. My legs didn't feel like cement. I even noticed my digestion had improved, no more bloating, no more late-night heartburn. Even my mood shifted. I used to snap easily, feel emotionally drained by the smallest things. But now, I felt resilient. Clear-headed. As if sleep had pressed some kind of reset button deep in my brain. I didn't need sleeping pills. I didn't need fancy machines. I just needed my body to remember how to feel safe. And through the soft discipline of rhythm, nourishment, and gentleness, it finally did. Part 7. The 3 things I removed that made the biggest difference. Once I began sleeping again, I didn't stop at just what I was adding. I became very aware of what I needed to remove. Not just foods, but habits, even people, that were working against my health. The first thing I removed? Evening news and screens. I hadn't realized how overstimulating those glowing rectangles were: phones, TVs, tablets. Even if I wasn't watching something stressful, the light alone was enough to suppress melatonin production by nearly 50%. And if I was watching the news or social media, that would send my nervous system into alert mode right before bed. Now, my TV stays off after 7:30 p.m. I charge my phone in the kitchen. I even bought a small analog alarm clock so I wouldn't use my phone as one. The freedom from that digital world was surprising. It gave me space to breathe again. The second thing I removed? Late-night sugar and caffeine. Yes, even decaf. I used to think a small cookie or half a cup of tea wouldn't hurt, but it turns out that sugar at night causes a cortisol spike in many people over 60. It also feeds inflammation in the gut, something we don't feel right away, but which shows up as restless sleep. So now? No caffeine after 2 p.m., and no added sugar after dinner. If I'm craving something sweet, I have a small piece of fruit, half a kiwi or a baked pear with cinnamon. The third, and most personal, thing I removed was overcommitment. I started saying no to evening events I didn't truly want to attend. No to phone calls that drained me. No to unnecessary stress. I realized that a peaceful night starts in the day, with boundaries. And those no's? They became my new kind of self-care. Part 8. A secret ingredient that changed everything. One night, while browsing an old herbal book from the local library, I stumbled upon something unusual: a description of passion flower. I'd heard of valerian, chamomile, lavender. But passion flower? It was described as nature's gentle sedative, especially useful for quieting a racing mind. Intrigued, I asked my doctor, and with his approval, I added a few drops of organic passion flower tincture to my evening tea. The result was astonishing. My body would ease into sleep, not as if it were being forced, but as if it were being gently persuaded. I didn't feel drowsy or sedated, I felt calm. My thoughts slowed down. That low hum of anxiety that usually lived in the background? It dimmed. And unlike some supplements that make you groggy in the morning, passion flower left me clear. Rested. Even optimistic. I began rotating it with lemon balm and magnolia bark, not every night, but 2 to 3 times a week, depending on how my body felt. For the first time in years, I felt in control of my sleep, instead of being at the mercy of it. Part 9. The unseen gifts of deep sleep. It's hard to explain to someone who's always been a good sleeper just how precious it is to fall asleep easily, stay asleep, and wake up refreshed. But for those of us who've spent years waking up at 2 a.m., staring at the ceiling, praying for rest, you'll understand when I say, sleep is more than rest. It's restoration. It's memory. It's life itself. After a few weeks of consistent sleep, I noticed my skin improved. My hands, once dry and cracked, became softer. The puffiness under my eyes disappeared. My hair even looked fuller. My digestion changed, too. I used to wake up bloated, with heartburn and occasional constipation. But now, with sleep supporting my parasympathetic nervous system, everything moved like clockwork. Most surprisingly, my mood changed. Not just emotionally, but hormonally. I didn't cry as easily. I didn't feel overwhelmed by small things. It was as if sleep had rebuilt the emotional scaffolding inside me, strong, balanced, reliable. Sleep didn't just make me feel rested. It made me feel like myself again. And perhaps the greatest gift of all? Hope. I stopped thinking of aging as a slow decline and began seeing it as a season. One where I could still bloom, still grow, still feel well, even at 79. Part 10. My nightly ritual, step by step. By now, my nights had become sacred. Not rigid, but intentional. I had built a simple, calming rhythm that helped my body recognize when it was time to let go. And it all started with just 1 hour before bed. First, I dim the lights. I don't mean just turning off the main bulb, I use warm-tone lamps and even candlelight in my living room. This simple act reduces blue light exposure and signals to my brain that evening has begun. Second, I brew my tea. I rotate between chamomile lavender, passion flower with lemon balm, or warm turmeric milk with nutmeg. I always sip slowly, seated quietly near the window. No distractions. Just sipping and breathing. Third, I gently stretch. Nothing too long, just 5 minutes. A few shoulder rolls, hip circles, gentle forward bends. These small movements release tension I didn't realize I was carrying. I pay special attention to my back and legs, they tend to hold the stress of the day. Fourth, I journal. Not a long entry, just 3 simple questions. What felt good today? What did I learn or notice? What am I grateful for? This small act changes the tone of my inner world. It stops the spiral of overthinking and replaces it with reflection and calm. Finally, I read. Never news, never something intense. Just a quiet novel or a piece of poetry. Something that feels like a whisper before sleep. And with that, my body usually begins to signal me. Heavy eyelids. Slower thoughts. I listen, and I go. Part 11. The 2 foods that made me sleep deeper. Throughout my journey, I discovered that not just avoiding certain foods, but adding the right ones, made a difference in my sleep quality. The first food? Kiwi. This surprised me. One study from Taipei Medical University found that adults who ate 2 kiwis an hour before bed fell asleep 42% faster and slept 13% longer. I was skeptical, but I tried it. It worked. Kiwis are rich in serotonin precursors, antioxidants, and folate, all of which support brain chemistry tied to sleep regulation. I now have 1 small kiwi, sometimes just half, after dinner, and I truly feel the difference. The second food? Pumpkin seeds. These tiny seeds are rich in magnesium, zinc, and tryptophan. Magnesium helps regulate the nervous system, zinc supports melatonin production, and tryptophan helps convert serotonin into melatonin. I mix a tablespoon of roasted pumpkin seeds into my evening yogurt, or sometimes just eat them plain. They're satisfying, grounding, and deeply calming. It wasn't about eating a lot, just the right things, at the right time. Part 12. The one breathing practice that changed my sleep forever. All the changes I made, food, lighting, supplements, were powerful. But one quiet practice did more for my sleep than almost anything else. And it required nothing more than my breath. It's called 4-7-8 breathing. Here's how it works. Inhale through the nose for 4 seconds. Hold the breath for 7 seconds. Exhale slowly through the mouth for 8 seconds. This pattern activates the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest mode. It slows the heart rate, reduces blood pressure, and sends a signal to the brain that everything is safe. I do it lying in bed, right before I sleep. 3 to 5 rounds, sometimes more if my mind is restless. At first, it felt strange. But with practice, it became a doorway. A portal from wakefulness to rest. I no longer lay in bed for hours. I no longer wake at 3 a.m. wondering why. My body responds like it knows what to do, because now, it truly does. And to think, all of this began not with a pill, but with a breath. With awareness. With choosing to believe that healing is possible, even at 79. Part 13. My biggest mistake before bed, and how I fixed it. For years, I had one habit I never questioned, watching TV or scrolling through my phone until I was too tired to keep my eyes open. It felt relaxing at the time, but it was actually sabotaging my sleep. The blue light from screens was suppressing melatonin production. Even just 30 minutes of exposure was enough to throw off my internal clock. Worse, the content I consumed stirred up my nervous system: crime shows, the news, even emotional YouTube videos. My mind would carry that stimulation into bed, and I'd find myself replaying scenes or worrying about things I couldn't control. I didn't realize how badly it was affecting me until I stopped. I began turning off all screens by 8 p.m. It wasn't easy. I felt the urge to check messages or catch up on shows. But I replaced the habit with soft lighting, herbal tea, and quiet music, and the effect was almost immediate. Within 1 week, I was falling asleep faster and waking up less. That was the moment I realized, peace doesn't arrive by accident. You have to clear space for it. Part 14. How I trained my body to sleep naturally again. Healing my sleep wasn't about tricks or timing alone, it was about retraining my body to trust a new rhythm. And that meant being consistent even when results weren't immediate. The first 2 weeks were awkward. I still woke up at 2 or 3 a.m., wondering why nothing was changing. But I kept going. I reminded myself gently, this is a process. Not a punishment. One thing that helped immensely was waking up at the same time every morning, even if I hadn't slept well. That might sound counterintuitive, but it helped reset my circadian rhythm. My body began to recognize when to rise, and slowly, when to rest. I also started getting morning sunlight as soon as I could. 10 to 15 minutes outdoors, just sitting or walking quietly. That exposure anchored my internal clock and told my brain, daytime is here. In the beginning, it was hard. But by week 3, I noticed something new: sleepiness arrived on its own. I didn't have to chase it. I just had to make room for it, and let my body do what it was designed to do. Part 15. The science that confirmed I was on the right track. I didn't begin this journey with research in hand, I just followed what felt natural. But later, I looked into what science had to say, and it confirmed nearly everything I had discovered through trial and error. Sleep latency, or how fast we fall asleep, is directly affected by evening routines. A study from the Journal of Clinical Sleep Medicine showed that reduced screen time, light exposure, and caffeine intake improve latency significantly, especially in older adults. Magnesium and melatonin play key roles in sleep regulation. Magnesium deficiency, common in people over 60, disrupts the nervous system. A 2012 double-blind study showed that magnesium supplementation improved sleep time, sleep efficiency, and early morning alertness in older adults. Kiwi and tart cherry juice have both been shown to naturally raise serotonin and melatonin levels. Kiwis, in particular, help increase total sleep time and reduce nighttime wakefulness. Breathwork techniques like 4-7-8 have been linked to parasympathetic activation, which lowers cortisol, the stress hormone that keeps the brain alert. Lower cortisol levels are consistently associated with deeper, longer sleep. It felt validating to know that my personal story wasn't just anecdotal, it was supported by evidence. But more than that, it reminded me that our bodies are wise, and when we slow down enough to listen, they often guide us toward healing. Part 16. The emotional impact of finally sleeping again. The first morning I woke up after a full, uninterrupted night of sleep, I sat on the edge of the bed in silence. No panic. No dry mouth. No dizziness. Just a gentle stillness I hadn't felt in years. And then something unexpected happened, I began to cry. Not from sadness. But from relief. Because sleep is more than rest. It's restoration. It's the quiet repair of the mind, the nerves, the memory, the immune system. It's the return of your confidence. And when you've lived without it long enough, the first time you feel it again, it's overwhelming. I made breakfast slowly that morning. I smiled more. I even called a friend I hadn't spoken to in months, just to say hello. There was a calm energy in my voice I hadn't heard in a long time. It was like rediscovering a part of myself I thought had disappeared with age. But it hadn't. It was only asleep, waiting to return. Part 17. What I do every night now, my final routine. Over time, my nighttime ritual has become a sacred part of my life. Not strict or clinical, but peaceful, purposeful. Here's what I do now, nearly every night. Early dinner, I eat around 6:30 p.m., choosing lighter meals. Soups with lentils or bone broth, a small bowl of oats with banana and cinnamon, or grilled vegetables with a few slices of turkey. Magnesium drink, around 7:30, I mix warm water with a small amount of magnesium glycinate. It eases my muscles and quiets my nerves. No pills. No additives. Digital cutoff, at 8 p.m., I turn off all screens. My phone goes on airplane mode. No exceptions. Wind down ritual, I dim the lights. Light a candle. Sometimes I stretch for 5 minutes or read a slow, calming book, never one that makes my heart race. Gratitude reflection, right before bed, I write down 3 gentle things I noticed that day. A warm breeze. A kind word. A small moment of peace. Gratitude softens the mind and lowers nighttime anxiety. Sleep environment, my room is cool, dark, and silent. I keep lavender oil near my pillow and use a fan for soft white noise. Nothing sharp. Nothing cold. Just quiet. And that's it. No sedatives. No struggle. Just rhythm. My body does the rest. Part 18. What I want you to remember tonight. If you've been battling sleepless nights, I want to leave you with something important, something I wish someone had told me when I felt most hopeless. You are not broken. You are not weak. You are not lazy. And you are not alone. Sleep doesn't vanish with age, it simply needs a softer approach. One that honors rhythm, silence, and nourishment. Maybe tonight, just try one small thing, turn off your phone early. Or have a warm drink instead of dessert. Or step outside and breathe the evening air for 5 slow minutes. Don't expect perfection. Expect quiet progress. That's how healing begins. And when it comes, it will feel like coming home to a part of you that was never truly gone, only waiting for you to return. Tonight, may you rest deeply. And tomorrow, may you rise whole.